they found that 70% of these highly viewed autism-based videos on TikTok were either wrong or overgeneralized.
Welcome to Transforming the Toddler Years, the podcast for conscious parents, caregivers, and educators who believe tantrums aren't terrible. They are powerful opportunities for connection, growth, and learning during the first 5 years. You'll explore how to use intentional language to raise calm, confident, and deeply connected kids, because the way we talk to kids becomes how they see themselves and engage with the world. Hi, I'm your host, Cara, classroom teacher turned parent educator and teacher trainer. Are you ready to nurture your children's mind, body, and spirit? Welcome, Toddler Tribe. Let's transform the toddler years together. Worried your child has a delay? Noticing red flags that might mean they have autism? My guest today is awesome. Her name is Dr. Theresa Lyons, and she's the founder of Navigating Autism, spelled just like that, AWE. Her goal is to help you know which red flags are just typically developing because your child is a little human, and which red flags means that you might want to explore further with professionals if your child needs an autism diagnosis to help them move through and gain strategies. Her signature Navigating Autism Matrix is the first evidence-based roadmap that organizes this overwhelming autism research into a clear step-by-step framework you can use. She has worked with families in 21 countries, and they're cutting through the noise. If you want to make some confident decisions about what comes next for your child's best interests, this is the episode for you. Dr. Lyons, we are here to talk about autism, AWE-tism, and I love that that is your view. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So there's been a lot of conversation recently about autism, overdiagnosis, increased diagnosis, parent confusion around, do their kids' behaviors meet that criteria, or are they just a typically developing 2, 3, 4-year-old? And then the big one, right? We came out of the pandemic and we have social and emotional behaviors that are not matching developmental charts. And everyone is saying, what is this? So there is a lot to cover here. And I would love to just jump right in.
Sure. Yes, there's definitely lots to talk about. So where do you want to start?
So let's actually start with this post-COVID experience. I know we're 5 years and change past the precipitation moment, that big precipice moment. And those kids are now 5, 6 years old. But what about our 4-year-olds? What about our 3-year-olds? What is it that we're noticing these days in those kiddos that are pro-social skills that they have yet to master that are looking like red flags for autism?
Sure. So some of the red flags for autism have to do with play. And that social interaction. And with the pandemic and the lack of a lot of that natural play environment that kids grew up in, for the most part, besides COVID, when you don't have that experience, then there certainly can be those delays. But the difference between someone who wasn't exposed to certain social interactions and social ways of playing and autism is, in that instance, you could help that child catch up, and it wouldn't be necessarily as difficult as someone with autism to catch up that same area. And there will be different red flags. So communication, verbal communication, likely will not be an issue with a child who is lacking certain social interaction skills. So there might be some red flags, but there's not the complete set of red flags that really would make it so much more difficult. And that's really what parents whose kids have autism have that sense. It's kind of an intuition where it's like, this is more difficult than it should be. When the parent has that intuition, that's really the time to lean into that.
I love that you said that, because one of the ways that you and I vibe is that we feel very strongly that blending the science and the soul is how we find out what kids really need.
Yes.
You're a scientist. Yeah. You have some seriously heavy duty, things on your wall, some beautifully framed things on your wall that say, I'm a scientist. But the fact that you just pulled out the fact that moms and dads and primary caregivers know what they're seeing, and if it feels right or it feels off, is really beautiful.
Yeah, parent intuition is important, and it's actually been validated in science that parents have a good understanding of the situation. They might lack, technical words to describe it, or to really pinpoint certain things, but the parent's intuition, when there's that gut feeling that something's just not right, I would definitely say to follow that.
So you talked about lack of communication as being one of the red flags.
Yes.
And we also are seeing a marked increase in the number of kids with speech and language delays and articulation delays. And so those referral systems are completely overloaded as well. So if we're seeing these developmental delays kind of across the board, where do you recommend parents start? Do they start by asking for a speech and language referral? Do they start by asking for some OT or PT? Or do they start by going to see if a full diagnosis for autism is the right answer?
A lot of these lists are getting longer and longer, the wait time. So I would say get on all of those lists that seem appropriate. So some kids can have speech issues, but they can write, they can color, they can put their shoes on, right? So there isn't any of that need for, let's say, occupational therapy or physical therapy. So in that sense, just definitely start to get in front of speech therapists. And sometimes it's appropriate to pay out of pocket just for that peace of mind. So there are always that options. You can go through the school and get formal evaluations that way. But there always is out of pocket, and that at least can give you some more guidance. Because again, the most difficult thing about autism is the diagnosis is based upon observation. There's no urine test or blood test or MRI. There's nothing that can be done to just say, okay, is this autism or not? So a lot of times you rule other things out. So getting in front of a speech therapist might be quicker than getting in front of a developmental pediatrician or a neurologist, because those wait times sometimes are 8 months, even up to a year or more. So if you can get in front of different experts that have this insight, they can help you really spotlight, okay, what are the issues? And then how can we start making progress before even getting a diagnosis?
That is such valuable information, because parents want to take action of some sort.
Yeah, it's important.
So I hear you talking about observation, and it feels like in those moments where we are in the unknown, especially as parents, like you said, without all the education to help kind of clarify what's going on, it can feel like we are panicking, or we're drowning, or we're kind of overwhelmed, and turning to the internet for information. There's just too much, right? It's
way too much.
A fire hose. So how do you recommend that parents stay as grounded as possible, observational as possible, and then know what to say when they go to meet this professional?
Well, so starting with social media, it's really hard to stay off it. And I have to say, it's really hard. So some of these algorithms are so good that, I don't know, it feels like it almost reads your mind, and it starts showing you videos on stuff where it's like, wait, I didn't search on that yet. Right? So I get that social media plants that seed. It really does. right? Because you'll see parents saying, oh, my child was experiencing this and it became that, right? And then that's one data point, right? And the interesting thing was research was done on TikTok videos in the autism space. So these are videos talking about autism, and these were the most popular videos. So it was like the top 100 videos based on views. And the scientists looked at the content and said, okay, is this accurate? And they found that 70% of these highly viewed autism-based videos on TikTok were either wrong or overgeneralized. So it's really important for parents to you can't stay off TikTok and Instagram and see these things. You've got to have that understanding that, okay, this is just the start of something. It's almost like, a neighbor down the block who you kind of like, sometimes they're, a little too chatty. They talk too much. Think of it as if someone like that told you something. So that's like the equal weight of TikTok, right? Okay. So it's like, all right. So then you might, if a neighbor says something like that, you might be like, all right, I'm going to call up, my mom. I'm going to call my dad. I'm going to call up my friend who's really smart and, she's logical. Like that's the next step to go. So you can't avoid TikTok. You can't avoid that little chatter and that voice and somehow seeing videos, but use it as a way to guide you in that direction, but start you talking to people that you trust and who really base things in logic. And you could say, well, what are you seeing with, my child? Do you see this? Right. So you can start building your own observations, but with people that you trust. And that's really how you can't avoid TikTok. You can't avoid social media and the what ifs, and those algorithms are way too good. And then it's just, okay, let me use that to point me in the right direction, because like science will tell you cannot trust those videos, right? And your child's health and future is too important to base upon just one TikTok video. So you want to use it to guide you and to start using more logic-based, science-based. So, okay, you heard one video, then start looking to see, okay, are there other MDs, PhDs, DOs? Who else is talking about this topic that you are considering? And build from there.
Wow. That is so good, because it's practical, real world advice, which we really need these days. And it's based in curiosity. Yeah. I love hearing that, right? Let me get more curious about my child. Let me release what I believe the expectations are supposed to be right now and look at what their reality is right now. Is that what you bring to the professional when you finally get that appointment? Do you go in with all your observations and say, this is what I'm seeing? Or do you just let them do from scratch their own high level documentation and observation?
So I usually recommend for parents to organize their thoughts. And if they can, to just send maybe 2 or 3 bullet points to the professional, whether it's a speech therapist, maybe it's a new doctor, whomever you're going to meet with, you can put your top 3 concerns. Not really more than that, because it's really hard to get specific and drill down and address them. So really those top 3 concerns, maybe, my child is 5 years old and they're only speaking in, 2-word, 3-word sentences, right? So that might be a bullet point. And then you might have 1 or 2 other points that you want to talk, but you want to have that focus so that you can really connect with that professional and make sure that the focus of your appointment is something that's really meaningful to you and your family. So if speech is kind of coming along and that's not your concern, but let's say maybe play is, right? Your child's not really interactively playing with other kids. They might go into a room and sit on the floor in the corner, right? If that is really more meaningful than speech, even if you see videos saying, oh, speech is so important, you've got to start with what is meaningful for you so that when your child starts to make progress, you get that feedback to yourself like, oh, yes, okay, I followed my intuition.
Yes.
I did due diligence. We did the work, whatever it is, because there's going to be work involved, right? I know videos do that like kind of before and after, and it kind of seems magical, but there's work. There is work in the middle. So when you put in the work and then you start to see that change and it's meaningful, then that's really the place to focus on. So the parent has to be organized so they can communicate to the professional what is meaningful and to really guide that.
This type of collaboration, it just makes me so happy to listen to it. I mean, as an educator, we found ourselves in spaces where parents, and some of them still actually are like, I have no idea what's going on with my child. Here, you fix it.
Yes.
Right. And I'm like, wait, whoa, it's not a me fix it. It's not any educator fix it. It's a we work together. And it's very much based in the scientific method, right? We have a hypothesis about the reason why this child is struggling. We are going to try a strategy. And if it doesn't work,
we're going to measure.
Yes, we're going to do it over a certain period of time. We're going to see if transformation happens. And if not, we're going to modify and try again.
Reassess. Exactly. And that takes partnership on both sides. So you want to find good professionals who are willing and open to have that conversation and that dialogue and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is the plan. This is when we'll reassess. I need you to do X, Y, Z. And the parents say, okay, I'll be able to do this, that. And you want the parent also to feel comfortable to ask questions and for there to be that dialogue back and forth. That's what makes partnership.
It really does. And everyone who's listening, I really want you to hear this. There's no easy button.
No,
there won't be. And it doesn't matter what the issue is, whether it is a real neurological diagnosable issue or we slid back and bedtime's now a struggle. Like, it doesn't matter. The point is your child's development continues developing all the way up through their entire life.
Yes.
So you're in this, you're in it to win it. So let's forget about easy buttons and talk about what Dr. Lyons was just sharing with us, strategies, plans, and taking action. Okay, Toddler Tribe, I'm going to get you back to this episode in just a minute because my guests are awesome, aren't they? Just love it. But first, I have a question for you. Do you know the difference between conscious discipline and collaborative discipline? I have a 4 C's of collaborative discipline model, and I would love for you to grab it. It's totally a free resource. Just hit the download button in the show notes, and you'll get a graphic that you can print that walks you through the 4 steps of working with your little people, connecting and communicating, collaborating, and then compromising. Grab it today and get started shunning all of those pesky power struggles and working with your little people to create collaborative solutions instead. All right, I want to shift gears for a second because I've been dying to ask you this question.
Sure.
When my girls were little, they're now 21 and 23. Okay. When they were little and people would talk about autism, they would then follow it up with, well, my child has Asperger's. Well, my child had, there was a spread of diagnoses that assigned themselves with high functioning versus low functioning. Therefore, the services met these kids where they were, what they needed. I was listening recently to a radio spot actually up in Canada on their national broadcast station that people are frustrated because there's one diagnosis now across the entire spectrum.
Right.
Tell us what's going on with this scientifically and if you're seeing any movement to parse those back out again.
So The diagnosis was combined. So you have Asperger's, which is your what would be now level 1 autism. So autism has 3 levels, and level 1 is what you would consider high functioning, but it's a misnomer in that sense, in that it seems like it's lighter, somehow easier. It's not necessarily easy, right? So the person might be able to dress themselves and feed themselves, and maybe eventually have their own apartment, right? But they're dealing more with anxiety, and they still have very real issues. Mm-hmm. And level 3 is definitely profound autism, in the sense that there's really no mistaking it. That person needs high supports, right? So they're going to need 24/7 care. They might not be able to be left alone at all. There might be, let's say, headbanging or, violent outbursts, real challenging behaviors. I also don't like that term. Challenging behavior sounds like, I don't know, like a walk in the park, and it is certainly not whatsoever. And everything has been lumped into an autism diagnosis. Part of it is just for ease of the system. So now in the United States, if you have a diagnosis of autism, it just automatically allows you to get certain services. I don't feel there's positive and negatives of both of having separate, but also not. And there's also the controversy that Asperger's and the level 1 autism, many people are taking it more as an identity. And then that's where the struggle comes when someone who is level 3, profound autistic, or their parents, and you have someone with level 1 saying, this is who I am. You shouldn't try and, address any of my healthcare needs. This is, I'm wrapping myself up in this autism diagnosis. Whereas someone on level 3 who is banging their head into the wall and has to wear a helmet has a very different viewpoint. So that's where a lot of the controversy and the tension comes from. Is autism an identity, or is it something that is profound that really can benefit from improvement? And to complicate things a little bit more, there is new research on genetics, and this is just the beginning. So we're just starting to understand this a little bit. There's genetic information that is coming out with people who are diagnosed with autism later in life that is really showing that a late diagnosis autism is different than an autism that is made early on. So this whole autism diagnosis has many different aspects to it, and that's why it looks different in so many people. And that's also what makes it challenging as to how do we really understand it and then help that person live their best life, right? So kids are having struggles with sleep, anxiety, constipation, diarrhea, so many things, right? And all of these can be addressed with medical professionals. But sometimes people just say, oh, that's just autism. Like autism is just all these problems, and it's not.
Wow. See, now I can understand why somebody who is saying, I don't know what's going on with my child, feels wildly overwhelmed.
Yes. And then the last piece of information to complete this picture, right, is the latest study in 2023. So over the decades, there have always been studies that show an autism diagnosis is not lifelong. So back when my daughter was diagnosed, that number was about 10%. So about 10, 12 years ago, the research showed 10% of kids who were diagnosed with autism when they were young lost their diagnosis, meaning they had an optimal outcome. That's what it used to be called. Now, in 2023, research up in Massachusetts showed 37% of kids lost their autism diagnosis within a few years of when they were diagnosed being a young child. Mm-hmm. And it's not considered a lifelong diagnosis anymore, right? That's the new term in the scientific literature is non-pervasive autism.
Wow.
So there is a lot of scientific information that is just coming out, and many doctors aren't even aware a lot of this because it takes so much time for scientific discovery to become mainstream practice medicine.
Okay, so this has me wondering then, well, first of all, that feels hopeful, right?
Yes.
If your child is diagnosed at 2 and at 6, you have done the work, and the transformation has brought that little one to a space where they can be independent, then great.
They can be who they are and what they want to do, and be curious and participate in life, and family life looks entirely different, and parents are sleeping, and they can start to focus on their own life again. Because a lot of times what happens is you have this crisis mode and you really have to focus and, like you're saying, put in that work. That is the time to put in the work because it pays off so much more in the future.
Well, that is amazing. It really is. And, because there's so many diagnoses that parents can get when their kids are younger that stay with them for a lifetime. So what is the point then of a diagnosis? As an educator, I'm asked this all the time, right? Like, is it even worth getting that word stamped on my child's IEP? Like, what's the point of it all? And so I know my answer as an educator, but I'm curious to know what you think. You've been through this, you've lived this with your daughter, and you've done the work.
So I think it's important from a parent perspective in education to have that diagnosis. Some parents say, listen, there's nothing that's going to change in how hard I'm going to work at this, whether I have an autism diagnosis or not. So for those parents who are actively putting in the work and doing functional medicine testing and changing diet and understanding the way their child thinks and communicates and doing all of that, for some of those parents, it's not a top priority. Some parents get it as just reassurance, right? Because there is so much, oh my goodness. During the process of an autism diagnosis, if you're working with a really good healthcare team, they're going to eliminate so many other things, right? So they're going to be like, okay, we know it's not a hearing problem. There are specialized hearing tests to do, right? We know it's not seizures, right? So the child might do an EEG for, 20 minutes or even overnight. You might do an MRI. Like there's standard care in conventional medicine to do to make sure nothing has been missed. So getting that autism diagnosis might mean you're able to eliminate all these other things. So then you don't have any question as to, okay, is this a genetic disorder, right? Chromosomal microarray is a gold standard of really understanding any beginning involvement of genetics with autism, right? So much can get complex and so much can be covered with conventional medicine, and so much then also needs to be covered out of pocket. So having the diagnosis can bring a lot of clarity for parents. It certainly can bring a lot of grief. It might take some time I really need to wrap my mind around this, and this is not the parenting journey that I wanted, right? Like I can say that is what hit me for a while. We certainly spent time eliminating anything else. And when we finally did get the diagnosis, I certainly was emotional that day beyond, even though it wasn't a surprise, right? And then there was a lot of anger, and I hated the word autism, right? So that's how the company I have is Navigating Autism. It's spelled AWE. I couldn't even say the word autism for a while just because I knew how hard that meant everything just got. So it was... Yeah. There are those emotions, and it's okay as a parent to feel those. And it's certainly important, but you just don't want to get stuck in them.
Right. Then what's happening at that point is there's two different human beings that are having their own process. But as a functioning adult with a frontal lobe that can do the work, you are going to move through your process and be to that self-actualized place a little bit faster, and then be able to refocus on your kiddo. When our kiddo was young, we We have two girls, and our youngest was diagnosed with audio processing disorder. And I was disgusted at the medical field for calling it that. Like, how dare you put a disorder label on my child? As somebody who's a trained teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, I've done a lot of work in audio fields. You know, I could read a speech banana. Like, I knew how to do all of that stuff. And I said, this is just who she is, but I had to allow it to get rubber stamped because that's how we got the services we needed for her to move through over the years and take ownership of the strategies that helped her understand better.
Right. And it's a process. You were angry and, don't define my child. But at the same time, it was what was needed so that you could get the help that made the difference.
Yeah.
So, but you also didn't chastise yourself for getting angry. Like, you had that anger, but you still then took action. Yeah. And that's the important part, is you feel those emotions. We can't control the emotions that we feel. I mean, every negative emotion you could imagine is what I went through with the autism diagnosis, right? So every single one. And none of them are wrong. So I certainly don't want parents to judge themselves like, oh, I've been angry and I just feel that emotion, just embrace it, whatever it is. Give yourself that time and say, all right, I'm just going to be mad for a week, right? I'm going to just really get it out, right? We have this strategy with kids, right? Sometimes when kids are having tantrums, you say, get it out of your system. I get it. You can't do this. No problem. Just throw yourself on the floor, move through that emotion, and then they pick themselves up and they go on for tantrums, right?
Right.
And so it's okay for a parent to say, listen, I need a week to be angry, and I'm just going to move through this anger. Yeah. And that's totally fine.
And the other thing is, and you talked about this a little while ago, I made a very clear decision once I moved through my emotions that in no way, shape, or form was I going to attach an identity around this for Caroline. Through our strategies, through our work with the audiologist, through all of it. Like, I always worked really through my language, the way I spoke to her about it. Yep. I was very clear. This is not who you are. This is how your brain works. Right? And so raising kids not steeped in the identity of their medical diagnoses, but feeling like they want to overcome is hard work.
It is.
It's even harder than like the exercises they send you home with. Okay. But the end of this story, Dr. Lyons, is that this kid lives in and studies in Tokyo.
Wow.
And it wasn't until the beginning of her junior year that she took her 504 and went to the academic support staff and said, actually, I need help. And here's why. She wanted to see if she could do that college thing on her own. Right. After accessing the help for all of high school. And I was so blown away by that.
Well, you raised a great daughter who wants to take that risk of, let me try this on my own. But then it sounds like maybe she was realizing, you know what, I need some help. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And that's what's important for parents to understand. And you want to raise a child who has that expectation of, I want to try it. I can do it, yes. Right? And there's nothing wrong with asking for help or needing assistance. And it's about building a team. So that's really the important part. Autism, it's about teaching our kids that growth mindset, especially if they have autism, because they're going to need that because they're going to have extra challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah, that balance between, I always thought of it as a teeter-totter. Like, where are we right now? Are we on the downside? Are we on the upside? And you will experience that too. You just will. Like, you don't hang out on the nice, even balanced for too
No,
long very often.
It's not life. I mean, I there's so many times where I'm like, oh, I just want, those easy days where you sit around and do nothing, but it's like, that's not where life gets created. You have those days, and those are like rest days, but then I don't know, to create a really fun and interesting life requires pushing those boundaries, and you really need that growth mindset, because when you push a boundary and learn something new, you're not going to get it right the first time. And you don't even want to have that expectation of, oh, I have to do this perfectly.
No.
Because that's a heavy burden to carry throughout life.
I think what you just said is one of my biggest takeaways of this entire episode. Parents, hear this. Dr. Lyons is telling you, yes, your child will have limitations if they're diagnosed with autism. That's part of the deal. But they can also have a belief system that they are capable of achieving and doing those things if they work hard. And those two things do not often coexist for us in life. We either believe there's something wrong and the wrong thing is just what it is, or we believe that we can learn and grow. But to have both exist at the exact same time is where the power in raising a child who is neurologically different, but capable of achieving anything in life that aligns with who they are, that's where it is. Most definitely.
Very well said and summarized.
Thank you. I believe so strongly in that. So you have an amazing foundation, and you're here to share with us how parents can take that next step. Now, my question is, before you describe what the resources are that you have to offer, do they need to have secured a diagnosis and know that their child has autism, or can they come explore your resources as a way to check out some of those red flags we talked about at the top of this show?
Oh, we welcome all parents. So whether there's a formal diagnosis, whether they're in the process of getting it and on wait lists, or if they're just having those initial red flags, we're about teaching the science.
Good.
So wherever a parent is in that process, the science is the important thing to know. So if there's questions about gut health and what kind of functional medicine testing should I do, and what about diet really matters, and you want to get those answers based upon scientific literature, then that is something to come over and check out what we do, because we teach parents the science of autism so that they can really make the best decisions for their child based on quality information, not TikToks and opinions and stuff like that. You want the science. You want to see is that relevant to my child? Mm-hmm. And then take action. And if it's not, then you keep going and say, okay, all right, what is relevant for my child, until you hit that synergy and you say, okay, this is where we need to focus.
Great. So we're going to have your platform linked right in the show notes so people can click over and start exploring right away.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for taking some time and cumulative wisdom. You can tell that you have studied this and lived it for a really long time, and that it is a heart mission for you as well.
It is.
So thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. You all know what to do out there, Toddler Tribe. Stay mindful and proactive until our next episode as we transform the toddler years.